Hey everyone, Liz here. I want to talk to you guys today about the dark triad. This is a very complex and challenging situation if we're in relationship or relating to some of these people. These are people who are part of a grouping in the DSM-5 called the um, antisocial personality disorders. So I'm going to try to talk about them and kinds of some things you can do about, some things to think about while we get started. Let me share screen and we'll get started. Um, this is, I present this with a lot of compassion and understanding because this is a deep and complex and troubling subject. Now, uh, I've just set a lot of pause because I don't think in 20 minutes or less, of course, I'm not going to cover it in great detail. I can cover it somewhat, but I recommend this is to pique your interest in a safe place here at CHWE if you want to watch this. If you feel like you're in some of these situations, to pique your interest, to get the research or done or the help that you need out there, okay? Now, I am not a licensed psychologist. I was in the Army as a chaplain and a counselor, and the Army trained me in psychology essentially to do all this work. So I have done a lot of counseling, maybe 15 years of it, and pastoral counseling. And now I'm out of the Army. Now I'm not a licensed counselor. I am a professional coach, and I still have the knowledge, but I'm not licensed and I don't do counseling anymore. I just want to be full disclosure of who I am. I know the shiz, but I've done my thousands of hours of counseling, but never got the licensing because I didn't want to. Anyway, the information today comes out of the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. I can't talk today. But anyway, this is a way to kind of clarify and define and delineate the different mental disorders. Now, you'll find there's a lot of overlap when we talk today about these three personality disorders: Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and narcissism. And also, people like Jordan Peterson talk about the dark tetrad, which also includes sociopathy. There's a lot of overlap, as we'll discuss, about what is sociopathy, what is psychopathy. We don't have to figure that out today, but this is to encourage you to get the help you need, to begin thinking about. I know couples and families that don't even realize that there is abuse going on. They think that's just life. I remember talking to a woman at my church back like 20 years ago. She read the signs behind the stall door saying, if this is happening, your partner might be abusive. You know, little signs that women see in the bathrooms. And she came out and was washing her hands with me one day, and she goes, of course all that stuff happens. I'm married. I mean, it's kind of sad state of affairs, but many people may not even realize that they're in these situations. So who am I? I'm basically a transpersonal psychologist, if you will. I like to look at the whole person, including the aura, energy fields, a spiritual, psychosocial in capturing of the entire human experience, which can involve plant medicine and energy medicine. And so that's kind of who I am. That's where I live and move and have my being. All right. I have a great quote here by Martha Beck. I'm going to read it to you very slowly. Really important. I got this quote from her like in 2010. She was my first coaching trainer. She's Oprah Winfrey's life coach. I mean, this does not bode well these days, but given the deep state, et cetera, but it was what it was. I loved her back then. Cruelty, whether physical or emotional, isn't normal. It may signal what psychologists call the dark triad of psychopathic, narcissistic, and Machiavellian personality disorders. 1 out of every 25 individuals has an antisocial personality disorder. Their prognosis for recovery is 0. Their potential for hurting you about 100%. So don't assume that a vicious person just had a difficult childhood or a terrible day. Most people with awful childhoods end up being empathetic, and most people, even on their worst days, don't seek satisfaction by inflicting pain. When you witness evil, if only the tawdry evil of a conversational stiletto twist, use your ninjutsu, wait for a distraction, and then disappear. Martha Beck got a psychology degree from Harvard University, for what it's worth. She knows her psychology. The point here is that if you're with one of these types in the dark triad, they honestly are not going to change. If you can, you need to leave them to be safe and happy. But many people feel stuck. They feel like they just love them so much, or that maybe they'll change. The painful truth is they likely don't change. they likely really don't change. Here's saying this another way. And I've counseled, like, I've been counseling for maybe on and off for 15 years as a chaplain and as a pastoral counselor. It's such a complex, painful topic. I have so much compassion for you if you're living some of this. I've lived a little bit of this, but not as bad as it can get. But these relationships can be extremely abusive and harmful. These people can be extremely abusive and harmful. And abusers purposely match up with nice people, like perhaps yourself, because they want to loose you. They want your energy. They want something from you. They want your money, their time, your stuff, your tears, your angst, your pain, your suffering, your devotion. You're coming back to them. You're doing what they want. They want control over you. They're getting something out of it, and you've been giving it. Honestly, there's always a match between the abused and the abuser. There's something we call the drama triangle, the drama cycle, which adds the rescuer too, and that's a topic for another day. So, but there's often a match between the abused and the abuser. If you are a guardian or caring for someone or have I misspelled it, a troubled child, this is even more challenging. In other words, you might be stuck with someone if you're performing elder care, you're taking care of a child. If you have a guardianship over someone, it gets very challenging. There's two big challenges with these abusive style relationships. And we're not talking the normal, like just grumbling at Thanksgiving type problems. We're talking can get really abusive, a lot of gaslighting, and a lot of violence and abuse. Seriously. Why is it so troubling? First of all, you might be stuck because, like I just said, you might have a guardianship or responsibilities for care. You can't just remove the person from your life. The other challenging thing is that you love them and you want it all to be better. The dark triad type has phases of being quite charming, and they lure you back, and it feels delicious, kind of like makeup sex or whatever it is. And you think that it will begin to be all right, but then it isn't. And the cycle begins all over again. Very challenging. Let's go over some of the definitions. But as I do this, you're going to see that there's a lot of overlap in terms of lack of morality and consciousness, lack of empathy for you or the victim, other people, lack of self-control, sometimes too much self-control, but there's a lot of overlap. And again, these definitions are in flux. Like I have a person I know that's a serious Machiavellian. He slips into definite areas of narcissism, right? So there's just moving back and forth. And someone may have narcissistic behavior pieces to them, but they're not necessarily narcissists, right? These people don't change, all right? A psychopath is a person who engages repeatedly in criminal and antisocial behavior without remorse or empathy for those victimized. These are people who are really cunning and smart and subtle. It says here that they have low self-control, but I would say sometimes the psychopath can really be plotting, and I mean, they're plotting to harm you. They have a lot of arrogance and self-assuredness. It may come from lack of confidence, but they have this plotting and planning and manipulative behavior where they want to get what they want from you, but they'll do more like underreact and sneakily push you to react and kind of gaslight you. Like, why are you yelling? Why are you screaming? What's your problem? Right? When they've goaded you into it and you've reacted, you've chosen to react, or you got triggered and you reacted. And now you're the one that's yelling and having the problem. And they're very sneaky and manipulative that way. They don't have remorse. The other ones don't either, but they don't have remorse. They don't want to take responsibility. None of the groups take responsibility. So it's interesting to define these because, again, lots of overlap. But I see more of a sneaky cunning with the psychopath. Let's talk about the Machiavellian. I like to joke that the Machiavellian does not want to kill the host. They want to manipulate you for your money and time and energy, your stuff, your wisdom, your knowledge. They don't want to kill the host because they want to continue to loosh from you. You'll get what they need from you, correct? So they use often clever but dishonest language to manipulate you to have power and control over you. They might just find yourself, you might be talking to a Machiavellian, the next thing you know, you've given them $10,000 or your summer, or you're raising their children because they handed them off and drove away, whatever it is, but they've manipulated you somehow to do these things. But you can see the commonality. They want power and control. They want to run the roost. They want stuff from you. They always have something to gain from you. All right. But in general, Machiavellian is like they want to move you around on the chessboard for their own ends. Now, you want a CEO of a company to be this, and you want commander in war to be like this. But the problem with the dark triad folks is that you don't want this in your intimate relationships in your families. Okay, there's times for this, perhaps. I mean, you could argue that it shouldn't be that way, at least in CEOs and stuff. But for the financial bottom line, maybe you do want a Machiavellian running the place, but not at home, right? So Machiavellian comes from the term from Niccolo Machiavelli, who wrote the political work, The Prince in the 1500s. And he's the one who coined, you want your friends close, but your enemies closer. He wrote a lot about how to win with political intrigue and stuff like that. Robert Greene, in his book 48 Laws of Power, talks about Machiavelli a lot. It's a sneaky cunning, especially in politics. Narcissism. I think we all have said that we've probably dated or been married to a narcissist. I don't know that there are that many narcissists to go around, but people can definitely exhibit narcissistic behavior. It is clearly, we already know the godlike complex, the serious preoccupation with oneself, one's looks. It comes from Narcissus, the Greek person who died looking at himself in the pond because he was so beautiful. It's an erotic pleasure derived from contemplation of oneself. But actually, it comes from a serious lack of self-confidence. So it's a bloating or an effect of pushing how wonderful you are when you really don't feel that wonderful. Imagine if you were just absolutely confident about who you were and sovereign, you wouldn't need to do this. You wouldn't care what people thought about you. Again, that platitude, what other people think of you is none of your business. But the narcissist really wants you to know that they're wonderful and take all of the air in the room and be the shining God in the room. We know this. Now, in the dark triad types, there's many different subcategories we don't have time to go into here, but there is one I want to point out to you, which is particularly sinister, which is covert narcissism. Covert narcissism is where the person does not want to necessarily shine, but they lack so much sense of identity or self-concept that they do a passive-aggressive style of, don't worry about me, no one cares about me, I'm just sick all the time, I don't know what to do, but don't worry about me. No, he never cared. She never did that for me. No one ever, where they kind of sucking all the energy because of their trauma or their story. But it's a passive aggressive way to get you to do what they want. It can include belittling, kind of like, well, if you need to do that, I just don't know. I don't know. I mean, you've always been so mean to me. Or it could include triangulation. What's that? It's where they involve a third party to kind of try to talk them into coming against you or gossiping about you, to say, yeah, you've been mean to her, you better do what she wants. And in general, these folks, especially the covert narcissist, tries to avoid direct responsibility for anything for their lives. They don't want to get up and take care of themselves. These are the folks that will threaten to commit suicide if you leave them, threaten to harm themselves. Very sinister. These things are serious issues if someone's suicidal, but like I'll say this a couple times this presentation, to use it to manipulate someone's very bad. Let's parse out a little bit the difference between sociopaths and psychopaths, if this helps. Again, we don't have to figure this out today, but again, I'm trying to spur you or pique your interest to research this further if you feel like you could use more information or you might be in a situation like this. This comes from Laura Antal from Very Well Health, from Google. But a sociopath, we tend to think that their environment, their growing up environment, their childhoods, what happened to them when they were little, is a cause for their current behavior. These types tend to lack some self-control. They have a weak conscience and they have often legal troubles or addictive troubles. They may not necessarily be trying to hurt you, but they just can't help themselves. They're just kind of out of control. But how they hurt you is that you have to go pick them up out of jail, bail them out, give them money. They don't have a house. They have irregular or lack of stable lifestyles because they just can't kind of get their lives organized. The psychopaths, often they think it's more genetic and biological, interesting. And they also, like I said before, the psychopath may not necessarily explode under pressure, and they just can be very calm, cool, and cunning, and just say some one little mean thing that makes you cry. They avoid developing relationships, and they use people for their own gain. But so do the rest of the dark triad, to some extent, right? They often underreact, and they kind of poke you to get you to react, like I said before. I see as more of a sense of cunning. Both can be violent and harmful, but I see more of it in the psychopath. Okay. And if you disagree with me, put it in the comments below. We can have a discussion in the comments for sure. I want to introduce you to the power and control wheel. There are many of these on Google. You can find your own, or you can pause this and take a picture. Many different types of abuse out there. And this is very interesting because many people aren't even aware they're being abused. They even don't understand. Like you just think, well, he just talks mean because he had a bad childhood. No, people should be nice. People have a responsibility to be nice to each other. You don't have to tolerate it just because his ex-wife was so mean to him, her ex-husband, boyfriend was so mean to her. No, they don't get a bye. They don't get to be abusive to you unless you allow it, which maybe you have been. A lot of people I know have been. Let me read the topics. We won't go into everyone, but Google this if you want. Using harmful language, right? Telling lies about people, triangulating, gossiping, using social standing. I'm thinking of the mean girls, telling mean things, being the only one to define role in a relationship, using technology. You can cyberstalk somebody, take over their computer at their house. You can do revenge porn posting where you post intimate pictures on social media. I mean, it's very bad. Using intimidation, like threatening looks and gestures and throwing things, breaking things, harming pets and animals. I counseled a couple once whose husband would mow down her tulips, her blueberries, and what else? Oh, her strawberries. And he would just say, what? It was an accident. Like, so awful. So someone else was throwing out his wife's gifts that she would get and throw them out, saying they were no good. Now, I'm not implying that only men are abusive. It's just these are the stories I have in my counseling history. It goes both ways. I would say it tends to be men toward women or to weaker people or more gentle people because men have more testosterone, but it definitely goes both ways. Abuse is all over the place. There's minimizing, denying, and blaming, minimizing the impact of abuse, not taking responsibility, saying it's not true, gaslighting, blaming the victim. Well, if you hadn't done such and such, I wouldn't have to do this, or I'm doing this because of my bad childhood. Like, don't let people give you excuses. It's not because someone had a very bad day. Some of the people who had the worst days ever are the nicest people. Okay. Using threats, threatening to expose HIV status or to leave, to commit suicide, to harm themselves. That happens all the time. Threatening to use sexual or physical violence, all kinds of threats. Very bad. Of course, very bad. All kinds of grooming, sexual assault, coercion, harassment, all of that bad stuff we know about. Very bad abusive type behavior. Exclusion, excluding somebody. It's kind of like social standing, excluding someone out of a club. I know in religious areas, people can say, you're not being a good Muslim, you're no good, you're not a good Jew, you're not a good Christian because you do A, B, C, and D, kind of judging, keeping people's friends from someone, and of course, using physical violence, of course. Some people may not even be aware that some of this stuff's abusive, like, oh, he's just having a bad day. No, it's abusive. So when I was doing this kind of brief for my soldiers or sailors or Marines, someone would always raise their hand and he would say, ma'am, how do I know if maybe I'm a psychopath? Ha, ha, ha. He'd get some chuckles around the room. And, well, there actually is a test for psychopathy. You can go look, take it with a grain of salt, but this is a test to see if it might be you. But psychopaths don't tend to change because they like themselves. It's in their mind, it's your problem. The point being is if you're with one of these people, you just need to leave. But here's the challenge. The challenge is, number one, if you're caring for someone and you can't leave, you're stuck, right? You have to develop serious self-care and self-soothing techniques. I have friends who are doing this at this moment, and God bless them. So that is a challenge, and that is a huge thing where you need to do that every minute that you can. I would do self-soothing as often as you can. The other category is if you just love someone so much, you can't leave them. They're going to change. They might change. They've lured you back with their charm and you think it might be better, but it's not going to be. And it's happened for 20 years now or 10 years now. The abuse still happens and you stay and put up with it for the kids, for the money or the property, or because you can't leave or because you just love them so much. And I'll say something else here too, if you're in that category. The abuser often gets charming at first. Raise your hand if you've experienced this. Charming at first. And then if you don't respond, come back to them or do what they want, they get bad. And then if you don't do what they want, come back to them, they get worse and worse, and it gets way worse before it gets better. It will eventually get better, but and if they're harming you emotionally or verbally, it may become physical. This is why escape plans are need to be figured out very carefully. It's a very tenuous situation. I'm not going to give escape plans here because I don't want to help any abusers. We don't do that. That's a privately given, so that people who are in the dark triad don't know what you're up to. I won't share those here, but I'm going to give you some ideas before we leave. If you're with one of these people, you need to just leave. One hint I will give you is I read this book, I think 15 years ago or 20. There's a book by Lundy Bancroft here called Why Does He Do That? Inside the Minds of Angry and Controlling Men. In this book, it's astounding. In this book, he talks about the different types of abusive people, the different flavors, if you will, and how to leave them. I would get this book if you're curious about what to do. It's really a very important book. There's many good stuff out there, many good books out there, but this is a very good one. And I'll remind you that abuse goes both ways. I've worked with same gender married couples. I married a lesbian couple 10 years ago, I think, and the more masculine female became abusive to her wife. You know, and women abuse men. One time I got a call from a Navy SEAL, Navy person of mine, sailor of mine, at 6 in the morning and said, my wife keeps trying to stab me while I'm sleeping. He found it kind of a challenge. And I go, are you safe? And he goes, you always do that. And he hung up on me. Like I just want to tell someone that my wife's trying to stab me every night in my sleep. And I always think of like John Wick or something, like in his sleep, just reaching his hand up to grab the knife. Like abuse goes both ways. Pretty crazy. Pretty crazy. So like I said, if you're in the challenge of caring for someone, do that self-care, do everything you can and take care of yourself so you don't lose it. And I feel for you. And if you want to reach out, if you're in that situation, if you want to reach out to some of the admins here at CHWE, we can help you, give you some ideas and advice. Again, I am not a licensed counselor, right? If you're in the other category, I would call, there's a hotline you can call and some other helps you can get. So I hope that was somewhat helpful for you. And I just leave in the comments below if you found this interesting or not. So let me see. Where's the rear? I need to record. I need to find the. There we go. There we go. Thank you for listening, and I will talk to you soon.